you're rebuilding the Russian brand, the Russian watch brand Raketa. And on the one hand, on the other hand, you are also changing the mentality, the attitude, the sort of impression of what made in Russia is both for the Russians and for the foreigners who will be familiarizing themselves with this brand for the first time. I'd like you to tell me a little bit about yourself. Why did you come to Russia? Why Russian watch brand? What connection do you have with this country?
So I came to Russia 17 years ago. I used to be an M&A lawyer in an American law firm. And then I switched to a Russian industrial group. And although the work was quite interesting, at some point in time, I understood that I wanted to do something else. And I kind of fell in love with Russia because Russia is an amazing country with wonderful people. And I quickly understood that Russia was lacking in, a high-end luxury brands. Russia has this amazing culture, fantastic history, a lot of traditions, very good know-how in many, many different fields, but it doesn't have any brands. Of course, it does have brands like Kalashnikov, Aeroflot, Gazprom, but I'm not talking about these kind of brands. So I thought, there must be some old brands that existed or still exist somewhere that we could revive or relaunch. And I started looking, and I was surprised to notice that many of my friends from England or France who came to visit me wanted to buy Soviet watches. So I quickly understood there was something about Soviet watches, and then I discovered that Russia had this amazing history in watchmaking. You had these amazing brands like in Moscow, Palyot, Slava, that don't exist anymore because all of these big watch factories collapsed. They didn't survive the difficult times of the perestroika, the 90s. And there was one factory left in St. Petersburg called Raketa. So I took the airplane, went to visit it, and I said, wow, that's amazing because they have this amazing history. The factory was founded 300 years ago by Peter the Great. They kept all of the production facilities. And in watchmaking, this is very rare. In like 90%, 95% of the brands in Switzerland, they don't produce anything. They just design and do marketing. So it's very prestigious to produce your own mechanical watches. And also there were quite a few iconic designs in Raketa that collectors worldwide collect. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. It's like a diamond that you can just pick up and you have to clean it up, polish it, and it's a diamond.
That diamond, that factory that you've discovered, and now you're trying to sort of make famous and efficient and effective. It consisted of people, old technology, and the processes that had to be either somehow transformed or kept.
Well, actually, there were two difficulties that I didn't realize when I started. I was very naive. I knew nothing about watchmaking, and had I known anything about watchmaking, I would not be sitting with you today talking about Raketa because I would not have started that project. The first difficulty is that I totally underestimated how much the Russian people did not want to buy Russian watches. That was a time 10 years ago when most Russians wanted to move abroad, to go to America, go to Europe. And it was a time when Russia and quality were two things that were totally incompatible in the people, in everyone's mind in Russia. Mentalities have changed. So we kind of contributed to changing these mentalities by doing a lot of propaganda about, Russian watches are, good quality, have these amazing values and incredible history. We make watches for cosmonauts, for submariners, for linked to the Russian avant-garde. So that was very, very difficult. It took us like literally 7 years to create our own market. And if we had started with making an analysis of the market, we would never have started because all of the indicators would have been red, don't start. So Raketa could be a very interesting business model, a business case to study in a university of how sometimes you should start doing something based on the vision and not just on the market analysis. So Russia has all of the foundations to have strong luxury brands, but just for various reasons it doesn't. So my vision was based on that, nature hates the void, and at some point the void will have to be filled in by by something. So that's why I continued, nevertheless, to fight for this project. And the second difficulty, which I totally underestimated, is how difficult it is to produce mechanical watches. It's just as difficult as sending a rocket into space, and that's the reason why so few countries can send a rocket into space. It's just extremely complicated and very expensive also. And I knew nothing about watchmaking, so I had to learn, and I quickly realized, it would be very, very difficult. So I thought I would, invest all of my resources into marketing and design. And unfortunately, for the first 6-7 years, all of our resources had to be invested in the factory in production to hire young people, to buy machines, to improve the environment, the working environment. That was very difficult.
And when you manage your brand potential, for example, and your brand awareness, how do you differentiate between the audience, say, for example, Russian audience and the foreign market, Russian market and the foreign market? Do you use different approaches?
We should, because basically it's two different audiences. It's two different clients that see our brands from a totally different perspective. And that's very unique because most of the brands like Rolex, for example, the whole world looks at Rolex from the same perspective. In our case, we have the Russians and then we have the foreigners. And it's two different mentalities. And really, we should do two different designs, but we don't because it would be just too complicated. Whenever we do a new design of a model, it's always the same for the world. And the marketing campaigns, all the marketing content is exactly the same worldwide. It would be just too difficult to adapt to the local market, to two different markets. On the face of our watches, we only write in Russian. So like Raketa will be written in Cyrillic. And outside Russia, people always tell us, why do you write? You should write in English because otherwise we don't understand. And we tell them, it's a Russian watch, and we're super proud of being Russian and Russian made. So you wouldn't want to have Raketa written in English. If you go to China and you want to buy something super local in China, you don't want it to be written in English, right? So that was a statement that we did that, it's a Russian brand. It has to be written in Russian, even outside Russia. The Russian audience is much more difficult because the Western audience is much more open to our marketing. The Western audience actually likes niche brands, very authentic brands. It requires a lot of explanation to explain to Russians why Russian brand is interesting. It's much easier to explain that to the Western audience.
Why is it so difficult for you to convince the Russian audience that it's a great product? You should have it. It's a great brand. It's stylish, it's chic, and it's just good to have.
But that's very easy to explain. To explain, I mean, basically, for 70 years, Russia was shut down, and Russians didn't have access to anything that came from the West. And suddenly, the Russia opens, and just it's normal. For 15 years, they just wanted to buy things from Western brands, and Russia. Meanwhile, didn't produce anything of good quality. But I mean, the Russian market didn't offer the Russian customers anything of the same quality standards as foreign brands.
But you said earlier, and in a lot of interviews, you say that you want Raketa to be the Russian Rolex. So let's talk about that, because what is the Rolex brand? I mean, having a Rolex is a certain status symbol. When you have it on your wrist, it means that you have achieved something in life, that you have the means, you have the power, and actually speaks 1,000 words. What do you want Raketa to be? What associations do you want people to have with that brand?
Well, first of all, I mean, from what I know, Rolex was nearly bankrupt in the 70s. So Rolex is a gigantic brand today, but at some point it wasn't as big as it is now. So we have the potential also to grow much, much bigger. Raketa is a Russian-made watch that is very proud of having its own manufacturer's traditions. We make watches that are connected to all of Russia's achievements. And Russia is an amazing country in the sense that Russia has, you may like or not like Russia from a political point of view, But outside Russia, everyone has heard of Mendeleev, Tolstoy, Большой театр, Pushkin, Gagarin, the space conquest, Russian submariners. All of these achievements are incredible, and there are very few countries in the world that have so many achievements in many, many different fields: technology, art, and so on, so on. So all of our watches are connected to that. None of our watches are just beautiful classic watches. All of our watches are watches for cosmonauts, submariners, polar explorers, Russian avant-garde, and so on, so on. So it makes our watches that the storytelling is really fantastic, very rich, and also it's authentic because it's really made in Russia. Like many brands say we're made in Switzerland or elsewhere, but it's not true. It's simply not true. They're just made in China.
You work with people every day. It's the people who assemble these watches, and they use the old machines, the machines that have been there for quite some time. So let's talk about that because there's an interesting story connected with that as well. You had Swiss consultants who you intuitively trusted more at the beginning. So tell me a little bit about that. How did that happen? How did that
Well,
work? What worked? What didn't work back then?
I can see you did some research. Yeah, it's absolutely true. Well, when I started, I knew nothing about watchmaking. So obviously, like everyone else, I thought only the Swiss could make watches, and I couldn't trust anyone else than Swiss people. So they came over and they said, this is Soviet technology. We don't work like that. You have to work like we work in Switzerland. You have to buy Swiss machines. But I quickly realized Swiss machines were extremely expensive, and also Russians didn't know how to use them because they're very complicated CNC machines, with basically it's different technology. So at some point, I just realized, why change something that works? We just have to improve the maintenance of the machines, um, the working environment, and other things. But the machines are perfectly okay. In our case, behind every machine, we have a man or a woman who gives a bit of his soul into every component that he produces, which is not the case in Switzerland because they have robots that produce the components. So